Hi guys. I already see some great questions, so let's see if I can just kind of ramble on about them for a little while. So starting with one from like way earlier, from like one of the early segments, talking about the trouble that I had in the very first segment, uh, where I forgot one of my powers and I couldn't figure out how to solve a puzzle because I didn't have the power. Would you say that games should be designed for longer times of gaming, say taking extended breaks, or would you say that generally they should have some reminder system? Also, does this game have a sort of move list? It does have a move list. We sort of went over the move list after that, and that could have been a reference for me, and that would have solved my problem. These questions, this is super subjective. I feel like talking about like how games should be designed in terms of the way that they engage players, as in like, how long should games be? How long should a play session be? How long should a break in between play sessions be? That's really tough. I mean, it is hard to prescribe those kinds of values. I think that what most games do is, I mean, especially, I don't know where Ori falls, honestly, in a publisher sort of spectrum. I would say that most like tentpole games, big like you know mainstream titles, AAA games. And Ori has a lot in common with a lot of those. It's intended to be descriptive. They do like market research on how long a player would want a game like this to be, and then that turns into a length target for the game. They do research on how long for this type of game for their target player. How long is a play session? How long do they go between play sessions? They have some sense of prior knowledge based on research of what their target values for those things would be. There are other games that I think are prescriptive about how you are supposed to play them. I'm trying to think of something that comes to mind. I mean, games that have sort of really strict save systems, checkpoint sorts of systems that don't save all the time. The old Final Fantasy games and other kinds of RPGs that had like specific save points. That's kind of prescriptive in how long they intend you to play the game. Like, you got to play the game long enough that you are going to end at a save point. In terms of like how long they expect a break between play sessions to be, I don't know. I honestly don't know how much that is considered in most games. I mean, I feel like my engagement with these games is pretty atypical. Because I mean, maybe I engage with them in a like reasonable amount of time. I play for like an hour and a half, about, and that seems like it's not an unreasonable play length. I think a lot of people play for a lot longer than that, which is also fine. But 90 minutes playing a game seems like something most games would be able to handle. But only playing once a week, I think, is really unusual. I think that like most people who are playing a game, if they play for 90 minutes today, they're going to play for 90 minutes tomorrow. And so that length of a break in between, I mean, for a lot of games, it doesn't affect them a whole lot. And for a lot of games, I feel like there's enough in the level design, there's enough goal setting, like the kinds of techniques that you would use to put together a level in order to indicate to the player which direction they should be going at any given moment, to remind the player of what their objectives are, like all of those things. It's not drastically different how you would design those things for a player who is, just literally playing through your game versus a player who might go away for a week and come back. And Ori, excuse me, too much soda. Ori does a good job of all of that, right? When I got stuck in the first segment tonight, it's not because I didn't know which direction to go. I mean, it was, I kind of couldn't believe that was the direction I was supposed to go. It looked forbidding, but there was literally no other direction for me to go. Like, it was clear that's where I was supposed to go. I knew what my objective was, what my medium-term objective was, because it was clearly marked on my map, and there was like a one-sentence objective that was clearly indicated to me. Like, all of that was really, really good. The thing that I missed was, I forgot what all of my moves are, and that is something that I will say about Ori and the Blind Forest is you have a lot of different moves. Like more than most games, or at least more than most games that I'm familiar with. And they do a thing where, I don't know, I'm used to a game like, Zelda, an action-adventure game where, you will have like an inventory. You'll have like items that represent the different abilities that you collect. And so there's no like, I'm going to look up my move list to see what moves I have. Like, part of playing the game is switching into your inventory. You do that all the time. And every time you switch into your inventory, like, here are all of the items that you have. If you forgot that you picked up an item, you're going to spot it the first time that you open up your inventory, and you're going to remember, oh yeah, that's a thing that I have that gives me an ability. This game doesn't have the same paradigm, right? It doesn't have like this inventory-based ability set. You unlock these abilities that are inherent to Ori, and it's very smooth. That like I don't need to switch out to a different item or a different like character state in order to do all of these different abilities. Like and they feel good, like the controls map well. But I am now at a point where there's a lot of different things that I can do. A lot of different button combinations that I can sort of like execute at any given moment. I have to keep track of all of that. And I think it's, it starts to become, that cognitive load starts to become something that you sort of have to be aware of and be cautious of. And again, I think this game does a stellar job of it. It's only because I went away for a week and then came back that I sort of lost track of some of that. But now maybe I'll remember to look at the move list when I come back at the beginning before I like get stuck on things. Okay, every time the Misty Woods changed configuration, there was a lightning flash that preceded it and a small rumble, I believe. It was doing that for most of the forest, but it looks like you only noticed towards the very end. What do you think of that subtlety? I liked it a lot, but how did it feel as a player? I noticed it a little bit more than I let on, because I didn't realize the significance of it. Like, and I actually can't say the lightning flash. The visual thing, I think in general, when you're watching me play a game, you are more likely to notice the visual elements than I am. So a lightning flash, I could easily miss and you would see. But the rumble, there was sort of like a camera shake and a sound effect. And that I definitely noticed several times throughout the course of the level, but I didn't realize that it signified that the level was changing, because that is something that I was unfamiliar with, right? The game had not prepared me to think about the levels as potentially dynamic in that way. So yeah, I didn't realize what it signified. It suggested a sense of progress to me, like I've done something. I've gotten a little bit further. I'm getting like I'm going on to the next area, but it didn't. I didn't understand that it meant that like things were actually shifting around me and new paths were opening up until the end of the level, and then like I sort of realized that was what was happening because I did it wrong so many times that I couldn't help but realize that's what was happening. I will say that, again, I feel like, I don't know if this is true, like the visual thing I 100% believe because I am focused as a player on systems and dynamics and all of these different things, and at a moment of intense focus on non-visual information, I could easily miss visual information that people watching me play would pick up on immediately. Like that definitely happens. I think it's also true that some of those, like the first several times at least, that I went into a dead end and then turned around and discovered a new path that had in fact only just opened up. I think that it was easier for you guys watching to keep track of the fact that those paths were opening up and I wasn't just discovering them for most of it. That might not be true. It might just be like I am not observant enough to sort of notice that, and another player would notice it right away. I will say that it doesn't require me to be 100% aware of what's going on to have the intended effect, which I think is to be disorienting. Because I definitely like followed a path and came to a dead end and got super confused about the fact that like, well, this is a dead end. Where am I supposed to go from here? It doesn't seem like there was any other way to go. And then backtracking and immediately discovering, oh, here's another way to go. Why wasn't I aware of that? Like that's a super disorienting experience, even if I don't realize, I mean, maybe especially if I don't realize that the level is changing around me. Although I will say that like once it became clear, once I like explicitly understood that the level was changing around me, when I grabbed that, you know, door key thing, it was still disorienting to like go back and retrace my steps and have things be different, to like back out of that dead end and find myself in a different place. Still disorienting. It brings to mind for me, I don't know if you guys know this, but the movie version of The Shining, you know, the famous one, the Stanley Kubrick one, was shot in a way that like it's got these big long panning shots of the foyer or the lobby of the Overlook Hotel. And it's hard to tell, like you wouldn't necessarily notice if you're just watching the movie, but that space is physically impossible. Like they use movie magic to make hallways like longer than the rooms that they're contained, like the walls that they're contained in. And it creates this sort of like very subtle, you know, maybe unconscious, disturbing effect of feeling like there's something just not right here, because you're at some level your brain knows space doesn't work like this, and and it's hard for you to actually like pinpoint what it is that's going wrong because it's so subtle in the movie. Um, but it makes you feel sort of on edge, and it makes you feel like disoriented. And that's, you know, obviously intended in that movie because that's what that movie's about. I think that's a similar effect to what sort of I was experiencing and what was intended in the Misty Woods, you know, whatever that was called, the like misted up, disorienting section of Ori and the Blind Forest. As a player in the moment, I didn't like it because it was disorienting. But as in terms of like how effective it was at conveying that feeling, I think it's excellent, and it made me feel disoriented in the parts of the game where I was intended to feel disoriented, which is very cool. How would you rate the game out of 10 so far, and do you feel that the difficulty spikes in the game are too high? Oftentimes, one of the, with the new onset or addition of a new ability, the game drastically becomes more challenging. I'd rate it super high. I'd give it, I mean, I might give it a 10 out of 10. 10 out of 10 we have established is not, like, perfect, right? We all understand that. It's just, like, really, really good. It's a game that, like, exceeds expectations. And that's certainly true of my experience with this. I, I don't know that there's nothing that I would want to change. Like, I don't know that I would call this a perfect game. I don't think there is such a thing. But if there is a 10 out of 10, I think I'd give that to this. It does have difficulty spikes, but I don't think they're too high. I'm encountering more and more of them. And I'm definitely encountering like things that I will die several times trying to get through. But I continue to feel like there's a combination of figuring out what the right approach to a situation is, and then like executing well on that. And neither of those things is like outrageously challenging. Yeah, I actually feel really good about the difficulty spikes. It's not an easy game by any means, but I am finding it like totally playable, and I'm for the most part not really getting frustrated with it, and that's what you want. You want a player, like, if a player dies a bunch of times but they feel like they have the ability to get past whatever it is they're dying on, that's great. That is not a problem. Like, players dying a lot is not the problem. Players getting frustrated is the problem, because players that get frustrated get bored, and when you get bored, like, your engagement with the game just disappears. So that's what you want to avoid. And I feel like this game doesn't have that. This game, between having as smooth a difficulty curve as it does in general, and having so much else going on that is appealing and that's dynamic, I like don't get frustrated and I don't get bored. A game needs to have difficulty spikes. Like, difficulty spikes are not the enemy. It's difficulty spikes that are too high. That's you don't want your game to be the same difficulty from start to finish. You don't want it to feel flat, because that's also boring. I mean, even if it's like, that's also boring. In the same way that, like, movies, I mean, a lot of the way that I think about pacing in games comes from some like really basic movie making theory. If you look at the way that like scripts are written, you've got like upbeats and downbeats. You've got like moments of action, moments of intensity, and then moments of rest. And you need that contrast in order to have sort of like any kind of effective feeling in it. I mean, if you go to a Michael Bay movie that is just all action all the time, like that gets exhausting. You lose track of that. You need these sort of like moments of things calm down for a second and then they get intense again. And in the same way, you need that in a game. You need moments of like it gets hard and then it gets easy and now I can breathe, and that emphasizes sort of the challenge of the next bit that gets hard. You just don't want it to get so hard that I feel like I can't do it. You never want me to feel like I can't do it. And Ori, my experience, and this is also subjective, obviously, but my experience has been extremely positive. Like, I always feel like, yeah, I should be able to do this. How good would you say Ori is at distinguishing levels from each other in terms of gameplay, sound, and aesthetics? Do the mechanics of each area match the theming well? Would you be able to guess what the aesthetics of areas were if you were playing a prototype with programmer art? Yeah, I feel like it does a really good job of this. I feel like it does it in a subtle way. So compared to a lot of games, again, so I'm going to pull out like Zelda. Zelda will be extremely explicit about its theming. Think about like Majora's Mask. You've got, you know, the water area, like the Zora's Kingdom, and then you've got the Goron Kingdom, and you've got the Deku Shrub, like castle thing. And you can look at those in terms of characters, in terms of aesthetics, models, in terms of sort of like color palette, all of that, and in terms of mechanics. And they're all extremely different. But they're different in a like very cordoned off kind of a way. Like you're gonna go to the Zora Kingdom and it's gonna be lots of swimming because that's what you do in the Zora Kingdom. And then you're gonna go to the Goron Kingdom and it's like lots of dodging rocks and like smashing things and climbing mountains because that's what you do there. And it like there's no subtlety to that. Like those are extremely distinct areas, and that's great. I love that. I mean, I'm a big fan. I think that Ori, part of what it does is there's very little break between the areas in this game. I would argue that only like the Jinso tree and the whatever it is, like, you know, dwarf mine thing that we're in now, like these have been special cordoned off areas. These have been like you know, boss level or level or like level cap things. They've been special. They're special events, and they're sort of you go into them special, but everything else is literally attached. You move seamlessly from one area to the other. And so there's a level of subtlety to that change. There's more connection between those spaces, and there's more overlap, I think, in terms of the mechanics that you use in them. But they are still distinct, and you know, I really notice it moving from like one major area to another. Today, I called out sort of the way that the music changed and the way that the art changed as we went from, you know, the section that we were in earlier, the Misty Woods sort of section, and when we came out onto that bridge. But it wasn't just aesthetically the game changed. the level design changed dramatically as well, and the world opened up in a big way. We went from like a very tight enclosed space to a very big open space, and that was about sort of um, uh, the way that you interact with those spaces changes dramatically too. Um, Likewise, we go into areas where there's water, where there are like these underwater caves. We go into areas where it's a lot about jumping around on lanterns and on projectiles, and other areas where it's much more about breaking through walls. I feel like a lot of these elements are present in a lot of areas. It's more about the balance of them, like how prevalent they are in different areas, that changes the character from a mechanical standpoint. So yeah, I mean, I guess I feel really good about it. I feel really good about how the game is distinguishing different levels. I mean, certainly like the Misty Woods thing, that was crazy different, right? Like the disorienting effect of dead ends and changing areas and not being able to use the map, like all of that was very, very distinct from previous areas. But I think in general, there is quite a bit of that. There's distinction between areas, even when it doesn't get quite so explicit as that. That's more of the like Zelda style. Hey, this is a different area that behaves by different rules, or that has like a completely different sort of world in it that you're not going to encounter elsewhere. But for the most part, the game doesn't have a lot of that. Okay, one or two more. In the Misty Woods, there were a few parts where the map would change behind you. Do you think the game made it clear enough that you weren't in normal space? And with the mist blocking the map, how was the balance between the disorientation versus finding a way forward to progress? So I talked a lot about this. I mostly talked about all of this. The one thing that I'll say is the balance between disorientation and finding a way forward to progress. I often found myself at the end, at a dead end, thinking, "Holy cow, I don't know where to go next." Which is weird in this game because this game has been very good about showing me where to go next all the time. But as soon as I turned around and went back the only way that I could go, I almost immediately found the place to go next. So the game I think it strikes a great balance. It gives me the feeling of being completely disoriented without ever actually disorienting me. Like I am always actually oriented. I am always actually able to find my way extremely easily. I just feel like I'm lost. And that's pretty cool. That's like a really neat effect that the game manages to do that. Okay. I am at that stage in my life where I have to pick a university course to study. I love games, I love game design, but I'm just not sure of the security of the industry. If it's not too much to ask, I'd love to know your reasons for entering the industry and the case for doing so. Security of the industry is not a huge concern, at least not in the States. I mean, I guess that's a location-based thing. There are, it's not uncommon for there to be like major layoffs in the games industry, but I don't want to minimize that. Like that's hard on people. But in general, the people who get laid off in one place find jobs in another place. The games industry right now is booming. I mean, like it's a huge, huge industry. It's making a ton of money. There are a ton of jobs. My concern about the games industry as an industry has more to do with quality of life. I mean, maybe that's the big thing, and then sort of related to that is burnout. So if you are, for example, a programmer, the game industry is not easy to break into either. But that's true of a lot of industries, and I don't think that's something that should prevent you, if you care about it, from entering it. But sort of once you get a job in the games industry, if you're, say, a programmer, but also if you're a producer or an artist or any kind of skilled position, game designer is a kind of a weird position. And we can talk about that, I guess, specifically. But most of these other positions, you could find an equivalent job. You could find a job that uses the same skill set, your skill set that you have honed for game design, that would pay you more in another industry. And that's generally because there are people who are enthusiastic about games, who get into the games industry because they love games and love gaming, and are willing to work for less because they're in an industry that they're passionate about. So know that, like, be aware of that. And be aware of the fact that because of that, you work hard. I mean, in AAA industry, at least, they work people hard, and people tend to burn out. That is a common problem. So know what you're getting into, I guess. Know what kind of a job you want at what kind of an institution. I'm not in the industry. I'm not at a AAA studio. I'm not even, like, I don't make my living on indie games. I'm an academic. I am in academia, and I make games in academia, and I love that I can do that. And if I left where I am, I think there's an excellent chance that I would go into the industry somewhere. But I deliberately found a place that I felt suited me, that was not in the industry. So, I would caution you not to have illusions about what the games industry is like. And there's lots of information. I mean, if you go online, Gamasutra is a great resource, but places like Polygon publish articles all the time about, like, insiders' perspectives on the games industry. And that's just good stuff for you to know. If you are looking, it's hard to give general advice, I guess. I would say if you're looking to get into the games industry, get in with a skill that will be applicable outside of the industry. Like, develop some programming skills, develop some producing skills, develop some art skills. Don't go into mainstream industry as a game designer auteur with the expectation that you're just gonna, like, start making your own video games, because that's not how it works. There are, non-technical game designer positions at big companies, but they're rare, and they don't pay as well, and they're low level. Like, you got to work your way up to the point where you're, like, making your own games. If that's what you want, then you're really thinking about an indie career. You're thinking about, like, working in the indie game space, because that's where you can, as an individual, as a designer, as an auteur, create the games that you want to create. And that is a difficult road to follow. Financially, I mean, it's hard to know where your next check is coming from, unless you have a really good plan for how you are going to be funded or fund yourself. That can be a really scary thing, but certainly not impossible. I mean, a lot of my friends are doing exactly that. Like that, it is something that you can do, but it helps if you have a safety net, socially and financially, and it helps if you can develop contacts, and attend the kinds of events where you can socialize with other indies. Like developing a network with indie developers is extremely important. Is a huge part of actually like making it as an indie. So when you're talking about picking a university course to study, I'm not sure. Like, I'm curious what those options are. Is it, like, is there a game design program that you could enter at your university, and what does that look like? What is the focus of that? Would this be like part of the CS department? Or alternatively, are you looking at like taking courses in art for games or games production? I think there's value in all of that coursework, and I think that almost all of it transfers over really, really well to other industries. So if you're worried about like whether or not you are gonna end up wanting to go into the games industry, if like you're attracted to that, but the things that I am saying are, potentially upsetting, which I would understand. Like if that's going to turn you off from going to games, and so it's just something that you're not sure about. I mean, there's nothing wrong with taking some games focused courses. There's not even anything wrong with majoring in a games-focused degree, like getting a degree in a games field, because even that is like that you're developing skills that can transfer over somewhere else. That said, I think the earlier you start thinking about exactly what kind of career you want, because there are several different distinct sorts of careers, and they're very different. And then a lot of what you need to do to be really successful in that career is beyond just coursework. And I think in all of it, networking is super important. So if you want to be an indie, get to know other indies, like make friends with them, create things that are going to impress them, and then show them off and impress them. Get to the point where you can look at the things that they're working on and give them critique on that and be valued by them, like become a member of that community. If you want to go into industry, then like get to know contacts at a bunch of different companies, especially people who are or will be in positions where they have some seniority and can recommend you as a potential employee to their superiors or to their HR, to whoever. Like when that company is hiring, know some people that you can call to get an in, because that's how you break into the industry. If you want to go into academics, like I did, then start to get to know the people who are academics, the people who write and talk about video games online and in literature. Get to know like your professors and the people your professors can put you in touch with. Like networking is a huge part of this industry, and I think that's true of most industries, but certainly in games, like your ability to make friends within the circles that you care about, like professionally, is going to really affect how smooth that process goes for you. Yeah. Okay. Cool. I hope that's useful. That's a big question, and it's hard to like give general advice about that kind of career thing. But I loved games. Oh, that was another part. Like, right? What your reasons for entering the industry? I did my undergrad in computer science. I got a job as a programmer. I thought that's what I was going to do. It was kind of boring. Like, it was a great job. I don't want to like put down the company that I worked for or my boss, who was fantastic, or the people that I worked with. They were all great. But I just didn't. It didn't engage me the way that I wanted to be engaged, and so I started making games in my spare time. And I made friends with people who wanted to do that with me. And I was so much more excited about that than a lot of the things that I was actually doing in my job. And I can't say that I had a great plan when I went to grad school. I just knew that, honestly, I knew that these were the people that I wanted to spend my time with. And that was the big thing for me, was like, this group of people, this is who I want to make friends with. This is who I want to be connected to. I don't know what I'm going to do, what my career is going to be, but I know that it's going to revolve around these people. And I lucked into actually like the academic career that I have had for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. But I think, I don't know. I don't know if I would advise that or not, honestly. But it did work for me, like finding the people who excite you, who are doing things that excite you, and figuring out how you can sort of connect yourself to them, and do work with them, collaborate with them. That was extremely useful to me. And that's sort of how I got to where I am. But I do love games. And I love games as a cultural form. And it would be hard for me to go into AAA, where I think games as a cultural form is not always the priority. So I don't know. Yeah, that wasn't the question. So I'm not going to try to answer it. Hopefully some of that was helpful. I am super excited to keep playing Ori and the Blind Forest. I don't know how many more episodes I've got. I feel like I'm close to getting the next world event thing, where I'll be like 2/3 of the way through the game-ish. So I don't know what that math is. I've been playing for several weeks, so probably several more weeks. But I'm totally down if people don't get bored of watching me play this game, because this is such a good game to play. So I will see you guys next time. Have a great week in the meantime, and yeah, thanks for being here. I really appreciate you watching this and enjoying it and being part of the play-by-play community. Have a great night.